Typical salmon fishing setup involves cured salmon eggs and pre-tied leaders that are usually stored in a pool noodle. So the key issue here is that usually cured salmon eggs stain your skin pink, and I would prefer to have all of these hooks baited the night before. So essentially my solution would involve creating a push fitting at the bottom of this mason jar that could be inserted into the pool noodle, allowing your lines to go straight through all the way down the pool noodle. While looking around my apartment, I actually found that the handle of this lint roller fit perfectly into the pool noodle, so I plan to use this handle as the push fitting. The idea here is to make a model that I can then use to make a foam mold. With that foam mold, I can then cast a resin plastic and I can have one whole unibody part. To create this model, I took what is now my push fitting and epoxied it to a mason jar, with which I used a glass hole saw to cut a hole in. That's where my leader will come through later. I then used repair putty to cover the seam between the mason jar and push fitting. I allowed this to harden for an hour and then sanded smooth for a seamless transition. I was then ready to move on to creating my foam mold. For the outside of my mold, I used a plastic container. The foam mold I used is a 2-part silicone rubber compound called Umu 30. I got it from a company called Smooth On. Part A of the mixture is bright pink and part B is bright blue. These two parts are combined at a 1-to-1 ratio by volume and then mixed thoroughly until a uniform color purple is achieved. I then transferred the mixture to my mold container and then pressed my model into the mixture, making sure to twist and turn the piece to get rid of any trapped air bubbles. Both the mold container and model had been sprayed with a mold release prior to this step. I then separated the foam from the container and then cut the mold into 2 halves using a serpentine pattern so that it would align correctly when put back together. Off camera, I took the inside of the mold out of the model, which took a little extra force. I then bound the 2 halves of the mold together with a bunch of twine and then sprayed each part with some mold release. I also got the liquid resin from Smoothcast, and it works in a similar manner to the foam mold. There's a part A and part B, and these are mixed at a 1-to-1 ratio by volume. I also added some red dye to add some color to the part. I then poured my liquid resin into my outer foam mold and then pushed the inner mold into the part. I then allowed the part 2 minutes to cure. If you watch the mason jar, you can see the curing process go from a bright red to a light pink. I allowed the part an extra 20 minutes to cure before I separated it from the mold. The finished product turned out great. The threads transferred perfectly and I was able to use a cap from another mason jar. The part also fit very snugly into the pool noodle as designed.
Dang it.